Vivid verses.
The invoice for the fall semester at St. Jude's Academy sat on the granite island, anchored by a set of keys and a lukewarm cup of coffee. The number at the bottom of the page was $12,000. That covered tuition for one child for one semester. When you factored in the second child, the technology integration fee, the mandatory uniform packages, the athletic department contribution, and the cafeteria meal plan, the total projected outlay for the academic year hovered around $55,000. I looked at the number. In my line of work, commercial logistics and supply chain management, a figure like that represents a significant capital expenditure. When you authorize a kind of spend, you do it with a clear projection of ROI. You expect a yield. You expect efficiency. You certainly expect to have a seat on the board of directors. In my own kitchen, however, I was being asked to act as an angel investor for a failing startup that had barred me from the building. The breakdown of the relationship didn't happen in a single dramatic explosion. It was a slow accumulation of operational failures, a steady erosion of the initial agreement. When Natalie and I met 3 years ago, the terms seemed favorable. I was 40, established, and looking for a partner. She was 36, divorced, and looking for stability. She had 2 children from a previous marriage, Leo, who was then 12, and Chloe, 10. I entered the arrangement with eyes open. I knew the statistics on blended families. I knew the overhead would be higher. I wasn't looking for a return on investment in a financial sense. I was looking for a home life that provided peace and a sense of shared purpose. I bought the house in the hills 5 years before we met, a mid-century modern structure I had gutted and rebuilt with precision. It was an asset I controlled completely. When she moved in, we discussed the financials. I would cover the mortgage, the taxes, and the major utilities. She would handle the groceries and the kids' personal expenses. It was a balanced ledger on paper. The reality shifted incrementally. The kids' personal expenses began to migrate to my credit card. First, it was a medical copay because she left her wallet at home. Then it was back-to-school shopping because her ex-husband, a man who lived on the coast and contributed nothing but sporadic birthday cards, had missed a support payment. Then it was the electronics. The first major red flag was the gaming PC. Leo, now 14, wanted a rig that could handle high frame rate competitive gaming. Natalie presented the request to me not as a luxury item, but as a necessity for his social development. All his friends have one, she said. He feels isolated. I built the machine myself. I sourced the GPU, the processor, the cooling system. I spent a Saturday cabling it and setting up the network parameters to prioritize his traffic so he wouldn't lag. The cost was roughly $3,000 plus my labor. A week later, I walked into the living room. Leo was screaming at the monitor, slamming my mouse, against the desk. The volume was shaking the glass and the window frames. I told him to dial it back. He didn't hear me, or he chose not to. I tapped him on the shoulder. He spun around, ripped the headset off, and looked at me with a mix of confusion and disdain. "I'm in a match," he said. "And I'm in my living room," I replied. "Lower the volume and stop slamming the equipment." "It's not a big deal, Michael." "God." He put the headset back on. I went to Natalie. I explained the situation. I expected backup. I expected the partner to manage the junior associate. Instead, she sighed, poured herself a glass of wine, and gave me a look of patronizing exhaustion. "He's a teenager, Michael. They get heated. It's how they decompress. You can't just come in and start barking orders. It disrupts his flow." "His flow is disrupting the household," I said, "and he's damaging the hardware I paid for." "Technically," she said, taking a sip, "you gave it to him. It's his property now. You need to respect his boundaries. You're not his father, and when you try to act like a drill sergeant, it just reminds him that you're not." That was the phrase. You're not his father. It became the universal defense. It was the shield she raised every time I attempted to enforce a standard of conduct. If I asked Chloe to clear her dishes, I was policing her. If I told Leo to take out the trash, I was overstepping. Natalie framed her parenting style as gentle and trauma-informed, which in practice meant an absolute absence of consequences. The operational friction came to a head during a trip to Cabo San Lucas 6 months ago. I paid for the flights, the villa, and the excursions. The total cost was equivalent to a decent used sedan. For 5 days, I acted as a concierge. I carried bags. I drove the rental. I coordinated dinner reservations. The kids spent the entire time on their phones, barely looking up at the ocean view I was paying $600 a night for. When I suggested we put the phones away for a family dinner, Chloe rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd strain a muscle. "Let them be," Natalie said, scrolling through her own feed. "They're relaxing. Why do you have to control every moment?" I sat there, eating a $40 steak, realizing I was the only person at the table who was aware of the cost of the chair I was sitting in. I wasn't a partner. I was a sponsor. I was the wallet that breathed. We returned home, and the dynamic solidified. I was the infrastructure provider. They were the occupants. The catalyst for the current crisis was Chloe's suspension from public school. She was caught vaping in the bathroom. It was her second offense. The school administration was firm. Natalie's reaction was to blame the school environment. She claimed the public school system was toxic and that Chloe was being targeted. She presented the solution on a Tuesday night. We were in the kitchen. She had brochures for St. Jude's Academy spread out on the counter. "I've already toured it," she said. "It's perfect. Smaller class sizes, better supervision. Leo should go too. He needs the structure. Structure costs money," I said. "Have you looked at the tuition?" "We can make it work," she said. Note the plural. We. I can't authorize a $50,000 annual recurring expense without a discussion about the underlying issues, I said. Changing the venue doesn't change the behavior. If they go there, the rules change. Grades have to be maintained. Conduct has to be exemplary. They will be, she waved a hand. Just sign the enrollment forms. They need to get in before the deadline. I signed them. I did it because I wanted to believe that maybe a better environment would yield better results. I wanted to believe that investing in the product would improve the quality. It was a lapse in judgment. I violated my own rule. Never throw good money after bad processes. Then came the incident 3 days ago. I came home early from a site inspection. The house was a wreck. Mud tracked in on the hardwood floors I had restored by hand. Wrappers on the counter. And in the living room, Leo and Chloe were engaging in a shouting match that involved throwing throw pillows, custom textiles, at the ceiling fan. One of the pillows hit a ceramic vase on the mantel. It shattered. I stood in the doorway. They stopped, looked at the broken shards, and then looked at me. "Cleaner comes tomorrow," Leo said. He didn't apologize. He picked up his phone. "Clean it up," I said. "Now, and get the mud off the floor." "Mom said we don't have to do chores until the weekend," Chloe said. "I'm telling you to clean up the mess you just made in my house." Leo laughed. It was a dry, dismissive sound. "Technically, it's our house. We live here. Leo, pick up the broom." "You can't tell me what to do," he said, stepping closer. He was almost my height now. "You're not my dad. You're just the guy Mom dates. Stay in your lane." I looked at Natalie, who had walked in from the patio just in time to hear the tail end. "Michael, back off," she said, stepping between us. "He's upset about the vase. Don't escalate it. He just told me to stay in my lane in a house I own," I said. "After breaking property I bought." "He's a child," she shouted. "Stop trying to dominate him. You have no right to discipline them. We have discussed this. You provide the safety, I provide the parenting. If you can't handle that, then go to your office and close the door." "So, my role is solely provision? I pay for the roof, the floor he's dirtying, and the vase he broke, but I have no voice in how those things are treated. That's right, she said, eyes flashing. Because you don't understand what they need. You just understand money. That's your lane. Stay in it. That was the moment the contract was voided. In business, when a partner explicitly states that your input is unwelcome while simultaneously demanding increased funding, you don't argue. You don't scream. You audit the books. You check the liability clauses. And you execute an exit strategy. I walked away. I went to my office. I locked the door. I didn't sleep that night. I worked. I pulled the deed to the house. I reviewed the state laws regarding tenancy at will. In our state, if a guest has established residency but pays no rent and has no lease, they are entitled to a 30-day notice to quit. It's a standard form. I downloaded it and filled it out. Then I logged into the household accounts. I had given Natalie 2 supplemental credit cards for household liquidity. I pulled up the statements. The pattern was clear. While she claimed to be struggling to save for the kids' future, the transaction history showed high volume, spending at Sephora, Nordstrom, and a local boutique spa. I canceled both cards immediately. Next, the digital infrastructure. I pay for the fiber optic line. I pay for the mesh network. I logged into the admin panel. I identified the MAC addresses for Leo's PC, his phone, Chloe's phone, and the smart TVs in their bedrooms. I created a new group called Non-Essential and throttled the bandwidth to 5 kbps, essentially dial-up speed. Then I changed the admin password. Finally, I separated my personal accounts from the joint checking account we use for utilities. I left enough in the joint account to cover the electric bill for the current month and transfer the rest, my contributions, back to my primary holding. The next evening, yesterday, I was in the kitchen cooking a steak. A single ribeye, pan-seared, butter-basted. Natalie stormed in. She was holding her phone. Why is the card declined? I'm trying to order sushi. The account is closed, I said, flipping the steak. What? And the internet is down, Leo yelled from the hallway. The router is broken. I plated the steak. I poured a glass of red wine. I picked up the stack of papers, the St. Jude's enrollment forms, and the invoice, and slid them across the island to where she stood. The tuition is due, I said. She looked at the papers, then at me. I know it's due. That's why I left it out for you. Why are you messing with the cards? I'm not paying the tuition, I said. She blinked. Excuse me. I'm not paying it. I'm also not paying for the sushi, or the internet, or the replacement vase. Michael, stop playing games. The deadline is in 2 days. They lose their spots if the wire doesn't go through. I leaned against the counter. You were very clear yesterday. You defined the terms of our arrangement with absolute precision. You said these are your children, not mine. You said I have no right to set rules, enforce discipline, or manage their behavior. You said this is your domain, and I need to stay in my lane. So, I'm staying in my lane. My lane is the management of my personal assets. Your lane is the parenting and provision for your children. Authority and responsibility are linked variables. You cannot hoard the authority while outsourcing the responsibility. If they're your kids and your rules, they're your expense. That's financial abuse, she screamed. It was a reflex, a buzzword she'd picked up online. You're punishing children because your ego is bruised. I'm declining to invest in a venture where I have no voting rights. I corrected her. I provide the house. That is a significant contribution. You provide the nurturing. The funding of their private education, their electronics, and their lifestyle upgrades falls under the purview of the parent with the authority. That's you. We can't afford this. She gestured to the invoice. You know I can't pay this. Then they go to public school, or you ask their father, or you liquidate some of the assets you've acquired, like the designer bags I see on the credit card statements. She stared at me with genuine shock. She had operated under the assumption that my affection for her was a blank check that would cover any amount of disrespect. She hadn't realized that even affection has a breaking point where the math no longer works. "You're a monster," she spat. "You're cold. You think money buys you people. I think money buys groceries and tuition," I said. "And I think respect is free, yet you couldn't afford to give it." She stormed out. Leo and Chloe were standing in the hallway, looking less confident than usual. They realized the Wi-Fi wasn't coming back. An hour later, the notification popped up on my phone. She had gone nuclear. A Facebook post cross-posted to Instagram. A picture of her looking teary-eyed, holding a hug with Chloe. The caption was a masterpiece of omission. "I never thought I'd be in this position. To have the rug pulled out from under my babies 2 days before school starts. We were promised security. We were promised a future. But apparently, if you don't bow down to a man's controlling demands, he cuts you off. No school. No food money. Just cold silence. Please pray for us as I try to figure out how to tell my kids they aren't worth it to the man they looked up to." She tagged my location. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. I sat in my office and watched the engagement metrics. Initially, there was a flurry of support. The usual, "You go mama," and "he's trash" comments. But Natalie had made a tactical error. She had curated an online persona of a wealthy, pampered housewife for 2 years. Her feed was full of the vacations I paid for, the car I bought, the renovations I funded. Her audience knew the score. The tide turned within 40 minutes. A comment from one of her former sorority sisters. "Natalie, didn't you guys just get back from Cabo? And didn't he build that insane gaming room for Leo? What do you mean he won't pay? Is he broke? Or are you guys fighting?" Then a comment from the wife of one of my contractors, a woman who had seen how Natalie spoke to me during the kitchen remodel. "Wait, you want him to pay $50,000 for private school, but you posted last week that he isn't their dad and needs to back off? You can't have it both ways, hon. That's not control, that's just bills." The algorithm is a ruthless thing. It favors conflict. The post started getting shared into local community groups. Strangers weighed in. "Let me get this straight." A user named Mike_77 wrote, "You live in his house for free. He buys the food. But because he won't drop 50 grand on private school, he's abusive? Lady, welcome to the real world. Public school is free." She started deleting comments. It was like trying to bail out the Titanic with a teacup. The narrative she tried to spin, the victimized mother fighting the tyrant, collapsed under the weight of the logistical reality. She was demanding luxury, not survival. She turned off the comments. Then she deleted the post entirely. When she came back downstairs, the atmosphere had shifted. She wasn't angry anymore. She was frightened. She realized she had fired her flare gun and shot herself in the foot. I was reading a quarterly report on aluminum tariffs. "I took the post down," she said, standing by the door. "I saw. I was upset. I didn't mean it." "You meant it," I said. "You just didn't get the reaction you wanted." She walked into the room, sitting on the edge of the sofa. "Okay, look, I'm sorry about the Lane comment. I'll talk to Leo. We can set up a chore chart. Just please pay the tuition. They can't go back to public school. Chloe will get crushed." It was a negotiation. She was offering me a concession, basic civility, in exchange for a 5-figure payout. "No," I said. "What do you want, Michael? You want me to beg? You want to hear you were right? I want my house back." The color drained from her face. "What?" "The relationship is insolvent," I said. "The liability exceeds the asset value. I'm closing the account. You can't kick us out. We have nowhere to go. You have parents in the city. You have an ex-husband. You have friends who commented 'Stay strong' on your post. I'm sure one of them has a guest room. This is our home. This is a piece of real estate solely titled in my name. You are a guest who has overstayed. I've drafted the 30-day notice to vacate. The process server will be here tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. to hand it to you personally. So there's a legal record of receipt. You'd really do that? Over a fight. It's not a fight, I explained, keeping my voice level. It's a realization. You view me as a resource to be mined, not a partner to be respected. I don't keep depreciating assets. You have 30 days. I suggest you focus on packing logistics rather than social media strategy. But the kids should ask their father for support, or you should get a job. The overhead of this house is no longer your concern. I stood up, walked past her, and went to the guest bedroom. I locked the door. The morning was gray. I woke up at 6, showered, and dressed. I could hear movement downstairs, hushed whispers, the sound of a suitcase zipper. At 7:55 a.m., I was in the kitchen making espresso. Natalie was sitting at the table, red-eyed. She looked at me, waiting for me to break, waiting for me to say it was just a lesson, that I'd fix it, that I'd write the check. At 8 a.m., the doorbell rang. I watched her answer it. A man in a windbreaker handed her a manila envelope. He asked her to confirm her name. She nodded. He left. She held the envelope. The reality of the legal system is heavy. It doesn't care about feelings or living your truth. It cares about deeds, titles, and timelines. I picked up my briefcase. I'll be late tonight, I said. I have a dinner meeting. I walked to the garage. I got into my car. As I backed out, I saw her through the bay window. She was holding the phone to her ear, presumably calling her mother. I didn't feel a surge of victory. I didn't feel malice. I felt the specific, cool sensation of a corrected error. It was the feeling of finding a glitch in the supply chain, isolating it, and removing it to restore efficiency. I drove toward the city. The traffic was light. I called my contractor. Yeah, it's Michael, I said. That remodel we talked about? The gym and the library. We can move the schedule up. I'll have the rooms cleared in 30 days. Let's aim to break ground on the 1st of the month. I hung up. The dashboard clock read 8:30 a.m. The tuition bill was still on the counter, unpaid. It was someone else's invoice now. I merged onto the highway, accelerating smoothly back in my lane.
Thanks for listening.